In the animated world of the Flintstones, humor often serves as the gateway to understanding deeper truths about human nature. The episode Como elegir una pelea contigo stands out as one of those rare moments where laughter and heartbreak coexist so seamlessly that the audience forgets they are watching a cartoon. It's not just a story about Fred and Wilma Flintstone bickering in their Stone Age home. It's an allegory of how relationships crumble and rebuild, of how communication becomes both the weapon and the cure. What makes this episode remarkable is how it uses prehistoric absurdity to speak of the modern condition. How easy it is to wound those we love, and how hard it is to admit when we are wrong. The episode begins with a seemingly innocent misunderstanding. Fred has come home late again, his shirt covered in quarry dust, his tone defensive before Wilma even opens her mouth. Wilma, who has spent the day juggling chores, household repairs, and Dino's chaotic energy, greets him not with a smile but with a subtle jab. "Another hard day or another long nap behind the rock crusher?" she asks, her eyes narrowing. That one line sets the tone for the entire narrative. From there, the argument blossoms, sharp, sarcastic, and familiar. The dialogue isn't just comic relief. It's a mirror held up to countless domestic disputes, where resentment hides beneath humor and exhaustion transforms affection into annoyance. Visually, the scene's pacing is brilliant. The animators emphasize rhythm, the back and forth of their voices, the exaggerated gestures, the shifting body language. Fred's anger erupts like a volcano, while Wilma's restraint simmers beneath the surface. There is no real villain here, only two people speaking different emotional languages. When Fred slams the prehistoric refrigerator door, the vibration causes the stone shelves to tremble, a subtle metaphor for how fragile stability becomes when anger takes over. The laughter that the audience feels in that moment is not just amusement, it's recognition. We laugh because we know what it feels like. As the argument intensifies, the writers skillfully pull us into an emotional labyrinth where neither side is entirely right nor entirely wrong. Fred feels unappreciated, constantly compared to other husbands, while Wilma feels unseen, tired of carrying the invisible weight of their home. These are timeless struggles, and the Stone Age backdrop only highlights their universality. The humor of Bedrock's primitive tools, a stone television, a bird functioning as a record needle, does not distract from the emotional depth. In fact, it amplifies it. By exaggerating the absurdity of their world, the show reveals the absurdity of ours. We too live surrounded by gadgets that promise comfort yet fail to bring peace. One of the episode's most powerful sequences takes place outside the Flintstone home. Fred, fuming, leaves in his car, his bare feet slapping the ground beneath the vehicle. The humor is physical, but the emotional weight is palpable. The streets of Bedrock are unusually quiet. The color palette shifts from warm yellows to muted blues, reflecting the loneliness of pride. Fred drives aimlessly, muttering to himself, replaying the argument in his head. He is both the aggressor and the victim. The absence of Wilma's voice, replaced by the sound of his car echoing in the stone canyons, creates a haunting atmosphere. It's one of the few moments in the Flintstones where solitude feels heavy, almost cinematic. Meanwhile, Wilma, left behind, walks through their house in silence. The camera lingers on the small details. Pebbles' toys on the floor, the half-cooked dinner on the table, the pet dinosaur sleeping near the couch. Each object becomes a silent witness to the chaos of emotion that just unfolded. The contrast between the bright, comedic world of Bedrock and the melancholy quiet of Wilma's expression is striking. For a moment, she looks less like a cartoon character and more like every woman who has ever questioned whether love is worth the argument. The line between realism and animation blurs beautifully here. Later, we find Fred sitting at a bar built from stone blocks, nursing what appears to be a prehistoric equivalent of a soda. His friend Barney joins him, offering comic relief that doubles as emotional insight. Barney's cheerful cluelessness serves a purpose. He reminds Fred of the ridiculousness of taking everything so seriously. Their conversation becomes a turning point. "You know, Fred," Barney says, "if Wilma's still mad, that means she still cares." That line lands not as a joke but as wisdom. The humor disarms Fred's pride, slowly leading him toward self-awareness. Comedy in this world is not escapism, it's revelation. The climax arrives when Fred returns home. He opens the door quietly, expecting another fight. But instead he finds Wilma asleep on the couch, a blanket half fallen from her shoulder. The lighting softens, the background music hums like a lullaby. Fred's anger evaporates. In that stillness he realizes how much he loves her, and how trivial the entire fight was. He kneels beside her, whispers something barely audible, and adjusts the blanket over her. It's a wordless apology, and it's perfect. The scene captures the universal truth that reconciliation rarely requires grand gestures. It's often the quiet, unspoken acts of tenderness that heal the deepest wounds. What gives this episode its emotional gravity is the way it refuses to provide an easy resolution. The next morning, the couple shares breakfast. Fred makes a clumsy attempt at humor. Wilma rolls her eyes and life moves on. But there's a softness in their interaction now, an acknowledgement that love is not about avoiding fights. It's about surviving them. The writers don't tie everything in a neat bow. They let the cracks remain visible, like fault lines in a stone wall. It's those imperfections that make the relationship believable. On a thematic level, Cómo elegir una pelea contigo explores the paradox of conflict. Fighting can destroy, but it can also reveal. In arguing, Fred and Wilma expose their vulnerabilities, the parts of themselves they usually hide behind jokes. Their clash is not a failure of love, but a byproduct of it. The episode suggests that love, to be real, must include friction. It must test patience, demand humility, and occasionally push us to our limits. What matters is not how perfectly we love, but how persistently. Personally, this episode resonates because it captures the cyclical rhythm of relationships, how moments of discord often lead to deeper connection. Watching Fred's struggle with his pride and Wilma's struggle with her patience reminds me that every argument is, in some way, a mirror. It reflects the parts of ourselves we least want to see, our insecurities, our stubbornness, our desire to be right. The Flintstones, in their stone house with their stone tools, show us that emotional evolution is far more difficult than technological progress. We have built cities, invented machines, even reached space. But we still stumble when it comes to saying, "I'm sorry." From a cinematic standpoint, this episode achieves something rare. It uses visual comedy to express emotional truth. The animation's exaggerated expressions, the comic timing, the absurdly creative use of prehistoric props, all serve a larger narrative purpose. The contrast between humor and vulnerability is what makes the Flintstones timeless. It's not just a cartoon, it's a psychological study wrapped in laughter. The episode's title itself, Cómo elegir una pelea contigo, is ironic. It implies choice, as though conflict were a deliberate decision. In reality, the episode teaches us that we rarely choose our fights consciously. What we can choose, however, is how we end them. By the time the final scene fades, what remains is a gentle message. Love is not about harmony, but resilience. Fred and Wilma's world may be made of stone, but their hearts are made of something far more delicate. The humor reminds us that the cracks are not signs of weakness. They're proof that something real exists beneath the surface. Como elegir una pelea contigo may be set in a cartoonish past, but its message speaks directly to our modern lives. It invites us to laugh at our own absurdities, to forgive our flaws, and to remember that the people we fight with most are often the ones we cannot live without.